All right, so we're going to try to talk a little bit about dividing fractions using drawings or pictures or diagrams. There's a lot of things you call it, but basically trying to visually look at what does it mean to divide fractions. So we're going to start by just thinking, what does it really mean to divide? So if I had, for example, the problem 4 divided by 1, right, what does that mean? That means if you had 4 things, so if I had like 1, 2, 3, 4 things, and we're dividing by 1. We're dividing into groups of 1. So you have like 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would give you an answer of 4. If I had something like 4 divided by 2, right? So same thing, you have 2 things. In this case, let's use another color. Group of 2 would be like this. Right? So we would wind up with an answer of 2. Okay, so we can kind of see there's different ways. That's just what dividing means. Okay, but when we're thinking about fractions, we're going to think a little differently. So let's say I had the problem 4 divided by 1/3. So if I'm dividing by 1/3, I'm going to think about drawing 4 wholes. Now if I'm talking about thirds, I usually want to try to think, how can I make my whole involve thirds? So I'm going to just draw each whole as a rectangle that's like 3 tall. Okay, so these are each one whole, and since I'm talking about 4 wholes, I'm going to kind of shade in each one. Right? But I want to split it into chunks of 3. Okay, rather than being like one group equaling 1 or 2, they're actually going to be smaller than one whole. So if I split these into thirds, right, I can think about 4 wholes as the same. One whole is the same thing as 3/3. So 4 divided by 1/3. Let's see. Use a color here. So this is 1/3. This is another third. This is another third. We can kind of go through each one. Each of these counts as a third. So 4 divided by thirds. How many thirds make up 4? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we're seeing that gives us an answer of 12. Okay. But then sometimes we might wind up with something a little bit more complicated. And that might be something like 4 divided by 2/3. Now I would set this problem up the same way, and I'm just going to draw my 4 wholes. Again, I'm making them about rectangles about 3 tall, just because that's easier when we're dealing with thirds, right? And if we're talking about wholes, these are all going to be filled in all the way. But we're dividing into chunks, and each chunk is going to be equal to 2/3. So I would look here and I'd say, okay, well, this is 2/3. This is another 2/3. Here's another one and another one. Now that left me with these little pieces at the bottom. So I could say, well, those two together, that makes up 2/3, because each one's equal to 1/3. This one makes another one. So we're seeing if we're splitting into chunks that are 2/3, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as kind of being our answer. That's what 4 divided by 2/3 equals. Now when we divide by a fraction, we usually get a larger number, because we're saying how many smaller pieces go in and make that whole. Okay, we'll do one more example real quick. Let's say I had something like 3 1/2 divided by 1/3. So now we have different denominators. Now it gets a little bit more tricky here, but we can usually still visualize this. So we're just going to draw 3 holes. Okay, and yeah, we'll just kind of draw them like this. 1, 2, 3 holes, and then for this last one, it's going to be 1/2. So we have 1 complete 1, 2, 3, and then half of this last one. So I'm just going to split it in half and kind of fill that in there. So if we look at this, we're splitting into thirds. We've got 1, 2, 3 thirds. And how many thirds go into that? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, and then wait a second here. We don't quite have a full third, but if we look at this, it kind of looks like about half a third, and actually it's exactly 1/2 of a third. So what we would call this is it's about half of it is there. So our answer in this case is not 3, 6, 9, 10 1/2 would be what that means if we're dividing into thirds. You could fit 10 1/2 thirds into 3 1/2. All right.